You know if you can or you cannot hear me. We have started the forum. So the community circle forum started yesterday. We had a live meeting yesterday. Early morning, we're going to have another one today, and I'm going to invite you there. I normally have a Saturday morning weekly support meeting, but that will not happen for the public today. That meeting is also going to go behind this private wall. So we're going to have a meeting today, just as we normally do, but the way to have access to the meeting is to join the members area. And from now on, the way to access all my meetings is through that. And pretty soon, most of what you see on video will be on that forum. I'm going to come here every now and then, but I don't know if you've noticed it. A great deal of videos have gone off of YouTube. The ones that are more experiential have left YouTube. And that was deliberate. And the reason for that is we want to put that where we want to put that in this forum where I'm inviting people who are really doing the work. I don't want to get into all the reasons, but there are a number of reasons why we put this behind a wall. Trying to build a small community of people who know the tools, who I can sort of guide and nurture from there instead of coming publicly and talking every day and teaching the tools from scratch. It becomes a little much, especially when I work off enthusiasm. That's the currency that gets me up every day, inspiration, enthusiasm. If I have to explain tools every day from scratch one, it kind of drains the enthusiasm. Just getting here and speaking spontaneously, doing what I want. There are a lot of other good reasons, though. This work opens up a can of worms, or two. It can happen where you're doing this work on a somatic level and it just releases energy or something shifts for you. And then maybe if you don't have anybody around you to bounce that off of, or just to say, yeah, that's what happens when you're doing repression work. It can be rather scary or challenging or lonely when you don't have anyone around you to provide the context to say this is exactly what happens when you inquire into this. Or we with this work, there's a lot of things that could happen because not a lot, but the potential for that is there because we accelerate things here. If you've been around KI, it's an accelerated method. It's been called, I mean, our work has been called like spirituality on steroids. And I think that's pretty accurate in that we do inquiry like everyone else does. But the way that we do it, as you know, has a way of just conjuring up what you can't see. So if you can just envision how you might conjure up this trauma or this repression or whatever else, and then not know how to deal with it once it's up. That's a real thing that happens. So what we're doing in this new form is building skill. We're teaching people how to have skill on their own side so that they're not dependent on teachers and even facilitators as much. To break the dependency where you're always looking outside yourself for the answer or for the help. No. Obviously you're going to be looking outside yourself here, but we're going to be teaching you the tools. So instead of continuing to come back to us, because it's not going to be about personality, it's not going to be about teacher, you're not going to be following a path of transmission. It's about learning tools. And anyone can learn those tools. Anyone can be empowered to learn those tools. And once you learn those tools, you truly are empowered because you don't look, you then have the same tools that I have. Period. I don't have anything you don't. Once you learn this work. And so therefore you can inquire into anything on your own or with a friend. That's how empowering it is. So we want to teach people that, but we also want to create a forum where we can support them and watch what they're doing to help them because many of us have gone through these issues, repression, trauma work. So we can navigate and guide you through it. Now, again, if you can't hear me today, and you wouldn't be able to type in that you can't hear me if you can't hear me, but if you're having trouble hearing me, please let me know. I'm just inviting people to the forum. So one thing I did yesterday And I'll probably do this every now and then, as I just created a video yesterday that helps people with stress using KI, reducing stress for the purposes of chronic pain. I also did a video on anger repression where I'm literally guiding you through anger repression work, and that's on the new forum. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have the forum is to be able to put up these videos where you can go there and be guided without a human being in the flesh even being there. Wake up any morning, click anger repression video, and you start looking at your own repression, being guided by me. Same thing with stress. Thank you. So, and I plan to do more of that because that was the vision from the beginning: is how do you support people? That's been sort of my one pointed focus: is how do you support people in this work? What do people need in this work? And this form is really the vision coming into fruition because I envision a place where you can go and you're not alone and you're around people that know these tools and there are people there helping you anywhere along the way. When you get stuck, you're never alone. Not just facilitators, just peers, friends, people in the community. But then there's also this shared information where we start to share information and insights and methodology with each other, and something grows beyond what it was before. There's something that I noticed in training people through the years is that when two or more people begin to study and practice these particular tools, the tools grow, they refine themselves, they develop naturally just from this process of people being together. So that's part of it too, is this work will grow and develop as we share it between ourselves. But mostly it's for that person that I envision out there. This is how I really see this. Of these people who are waking up, and so they're waking up each day, and they have so much earnestness. This is what tugs at my heart here, actually. People have a lot of earnestness. They've suffered a lot in their life. Excuse me. And they just want to learn this method because they just want the help from it. But maybe they can't afford to work in sessions all the time, or they can't afford to be in training. So I wanted a place for them. I wanted a place that where if people started to do KI, they could have a place to go and continue to do KI and be supported. And that I feel like we have accomplished. I don't know why that was so important for me, but it was, and it has been very important to have a place that people, that everybody can go and learn this method, not just people who have money, but that everybody can go. Why not? Why shouldn't everyone learn a method that they want to learn? So it's exciting each day then to create new videos to help those people. So I've done one on anger repression and I've done one on stress. I'll probably end up going through various, so there's going to be experiential videos on all sorts of things there, I assume, over time. So you have your resources all there when you go into the forum. We're already there. All the experiential videos that you used to like here are there. New ones are being created where we're guiding you through a process. If you notice what KI is part of the reason that it works so well is how we target something. So if you're working on, for example, the not good enough story, and it's the theme in your life where you're looking using the boomerang and illuminating that story wherever it gets triggered and inquiring into it. Um, you want to. That's an ongoing inquiry. It's not just you wake up one morning, you do it for a couple of hours, and then you no longer feel deficient ever again. It's a core story, and so you have to meet it for a while before it seems clear, before you realize it's not you, whatever, before it falls away. But so where do you go? How do you stay in a process like that? That's a decent question because if you're on your own, What will motivate you every day? What will keep you in the practice of looking? What will happen if you get stuck and you don't have anyone there? I'm going to see if I think that these are not working. I think my AirPods are not working. It feels like something just died there. So speak to me. Are my AirPods not working? Can you not hear me very well? I'm just going to keep talking until someone says you can't hear me. So far, I have one message that says you can be heard, but then I heard my AirPods shift. So I don't know, for some reason that makes me feel good to know that nobody has to be alone. That if you're in such a process where in an ongoing inquiry, you don't feel like you're going crazy. Other people have been through the process, they're going through it. They're just sitting there supporting you in it and helping you. Oh, good. Can hear you perfectly. Great. Thank you. Yeah. When I was going through the anger repression work, I was surprised at how persistent the story was. I think that's what the forum was born from, the repression work, truly. And if you haven't started the repression work, here's a little bit about it. But once you start, it's speaking of ongoing inquiry, you definitely need support during that. And when I look back and I think, well, I just did all of that on my own for the most part, and I did bring Dan in to facilitate me sometimes, but for the most part, I was just every day doing that on my own. But I already had awareness in my experience, so that awareness was a great resource during that. And I could rely on that awareness as things would come up around anger repression, knowing that because they arise in awareness, they're going to fall in awareness. And even though they were very painful, not identifying with them for very long, because I could see them for what they were, every thought around this. But what occurred to me is that someone who doesn't have that awareness in their experience, or isn't supported by people who can give them context about what's going on, that can easily result in people bowing out of the process. I almost bowed out of the process because of a few stuck resistant points, not knowing what was going on. As I stuck with it, though, I could just see that there's little landmines in this where, think of it this way, it's like if you're repressing anger and you start to release it as it's associated with the chronic pain area, what if you don't have the skill to fully kind of release it or discharge it or express it or see through it, and then suddenly now you're depressed? Because depression is sometimes described as anger turned inwards. So if it hasn't been fully expressed, it's still being repressed, but you don't know what to do with that. And you could just be depressed for a long time and not know that this is related directly to the repression work that you're doing. Things can happen in the body. So you can have pain in one area, and as you start to do inquiry, you can kind of shift into another area. And if you don't know how to deal with that, then you just have pain in another area and you're stuck with that. You could have states of overwhelm as feelings come back online they were there during trauma, but they were too big, too scary. Those can come up, or in order for them to even come up, sometimes we need support. Just need somebody there facilitating, even if it's someone on the video, because these emotions, our whole life, think about it, we've been avoiding this, and they're scary. These stories, these ideas, these assumptions we have about ourselves, whatever it is. Why should anybody have to go through that alone? But one of the main reasons I think is that overall, to have a sense of a map on what you're doing, Having gone through the various layers of the repression and the trauma work, there's no clear map. It's not like you say, well, you turn right here and then you do this for a while and you turn left. There's no formula. But things do tend to unfold a certain way. And if somebody's already been through that, they can kind of help people to let them know what's coming. So that whatever is coming doesn't take them over. They know what's coming, they know how to inquire into it. So that's what we're doing. If that sounds interesting to you, join us. I'm not going to come on YouTube every day for eternity or forever inviting you there. I'm just going to continue to do it until the people that are coming get there. And then I'm going to come back to YouTube every now and then to speak generally about something if I'm inspired. But if enough people go, a small community go to that forum, that's where everything's going to be from now on. My tentative idea in terms of meetings on that site are 2 a week. That's definitely tentative. But I was thinking of the areas that people need like regular attention on, and one would be, I think, practice itself. So we had one yesterday, just in terms of what is a good KI practice? Like, what does it look like? Do you do KI every day? Do you sit down and just do some for a block of time each day? Do you just do inquiry when it's relevant? And how much investment in this work does it take to really embody what it is we're embody everything that you've been avoiding? Can we just say that? To finally face everything you've been avoiding. Um, so just each week checking in, we went around the room and people explained their practice. I gave them tips and suggestions about how to improve the practice or change it. And I think that's something that should go on regularly because we need encouragement to stay in the practice. There's lots of reasons to get out of it. The resistance comes up. But that's a simple question that people are going to want to know. Like, what does KI practice look like, a good practice? So that at least maybe one of the meetings each week will be about that. And another one, I'm considering just doing pointing to awareness. Haven't seen me do that very much, but just kind of good old non-dual pointing to presence, which I haven't done much of in years. I know that there's a need for it. Many of you came from non-dual teachings, and so you're used to sitting with someone who points in that way. Now you've come here and you're doing inquiry, and you're discovering a whole new universe, right? The somatic universe is being explored for some of you for the first time. Your body is being included. But there's still a need to just pointing to awareness because even as we embody these things and do the real work that we've been avoiding, the awareness recognition is still relevant. And that's where it ends up anyway, is in presence. Inquiry, deep inquiry work ends there. So we'll be pointing to it each week. And then, but during those meetings, not just pointing to it, but incorporating how KI works with that. Because right now people kind of think of it as two separate things. It's like over here, my teacher points to awareness, and I'm just interested in recognizing that when I'm with my teacher, the the absolute, the whatever you want to call that, presence. And then they come over here and we're processing specific things that have tripped them up for years. Bring them together. What an idea, right? Bring them together so that as you're doing KI, you're also hearing pointers to awareness to help you stabilize right in that. But also, when I'm pointing to awareness, I can point to those things in the body that do require inquiry. If you've been in non dual teachings before, sometimes what happens is something comes up for you in your body. And because there's so many people in the crowd or the audience, or because your teacher isn't trauma informed, that doesn't get met. So many of you have come to this method with all these things in your body that just torture you and make it difficult to abide as awareness. So now you're coming here and you're stabilizing naturally in awareness because you're dealing with the stuff that you weren't dealing with there. Follow me? But there's still a need for the pointing to awareness because this is still a non dual thing for those who are interested in that. So I'll hold a meeting for those that are interested in that in true nature, essentially, recognizing true nature, but not in a way that bypasses. Wow, that's rich. So think of that. Pointing to awareness in a way that no longer bypasses, which would include little doorways to show you how to deal with that stomach contraction that's been making it difficult to abide for years. Like, what do you do with that? So it's nice. This work is actually developing, and it's always developing. So what we're developing now, what I'm developing is the integration of the awareness pointing and our inquiries, bringing them together more seamlessly. It's actually a skill. KI is a skill for sure. Pointing to awareness is not really a skill. There's some skill involved, but it's mostly just direct experience. You just point from your own experience. And you're pointing people to look in their own experience to see that the presence that you're pointing to is their experience. Nothing new there. But now, what if we point in a way that includes everything? So what if we point in a way that always meets you where you're at, no matter what's arising? So that if something in your body doubles you over, we don't just say things like, no, that's just an arising in awareness. You see, so we're going to go further than that. We're going to say, let's explore that stomach more specifically, inviting you into KI. And then as that stomach, the issue with the stomach gets sort of resolved, coming back to awareness, pointing back to awareness. See that? So integrating fully this work with just living in awareness, being awareness. So that's one of the things I'm working on. And another thing that I'm working on is how to lead a group of people in KI. So if you want to watch Scott stumble a little bit as he learns, on the forum, you're going to see me sometimes, like this morning, I'm going to lead some group inquiry. You would think that wouldn't be too challenging for someone who co-developed this work, but it is challenging because when you have a group of people, they all have different content and they all have different things arising at a particular time, body or mind or something. To nurture an entire group with KI is challenging because of that reason. But I've made a vow to myself that I'm going to learn how to do it. I'm going to master it this year. So if you want to come and watch me learn how to do that more, it's going to be fun. It's going to be rich. Um, and I think it's going to result in an even deeper experience together. I know the truth that people long for because it's my experience. That deep quietness and vastness, openness, simple, uncluttered experience of life. It was what I called natural rest, and I still do. It's another word for it is just living in the unknown. And that's the place where all these traumas come to rest. These repressions get lifted, and we live here. We live in a place that's just already free. I know that people are suffering out there, and I know that they long for that truth. They long for that recognition. Their soul, you could say, just metaphorically, their soul longs for it. For sometimes 10, 20, 30 years, they've been seeking to know Source directly. And yet these things stand in the way of the body. So as I sit here in quietness, I imagine what it's like for someone whose body is still holding onto the past strongly, and then you hear these pointers. Speaking of pointing to awareness, and you get pointed to quietness or space or stillness, and you can sense that somewhat, but the noise of the body is so loud. Not like a sound noise, but like in the nerve, it makes the nervous system loud. So therefore you long for that deep quietness, that deep knowing. And yet you get frustrated because you keep coming back and listening to these pointers to awareness, but nobody meets you where you're at, which is this noisy body that is a puzzle. Let's just be honest with you, until you get to KI or something like that, it's a mystery as to why the body is noisy. And that deeper quietness and stillness is elusive. There's a lot of gratitude just resting here in the quietness with no longer having a body, like it was during the chronic pain that pulls attention to it and loud. So the chronic pain for me was very loud somatically. So I got a new appreciation of the silence and the stillness as the pain went away. It's like coming back home. The silence and the stillness was there during the pain. The whole time it was there. But with the pain so noisy, it definitely had an impact on my experience of being. And so it helped me have gratitude and compassion for all those people out there who never even really tasted the deep silence yet. They haven't known this non-dual experience yet because they have noisy bodies that don't allow for that shift to happen. So I think my compassion and my empathy for those people was seriously renewed during the time of my chronic pain. I'm still trying to sort of understand, and there's no understanding of it, why I have such deep compassion for people who are suffering in their body now. I think that from 2007 until 2014, when I didn't really have to deal with major body issue, of course I had the contractions that everyone else has. I had the heart contraction in the stomach, but nothing like the chronic pain. And with the chronic pain and all the repression and trauma connected to it, I got a real glimpse of what it's like to be frustrated. For those people who've never tasted that, the stillness of the moment in a deep way because of the noisy body. So that's what I'm looking to do for those folks, is to reach out to you and say, look, like you can experience this too. The quietness is there for you too. The presence is you also. But without addressing what's in the body there, you're always going to be, that noise is going to prevail and seem to obscure the stillness and the silence. And I know what that's like now more than ever. When the body has the say. It has the say on your entire experience. It runs your whole experience. I know that. Poignant conversations with people. Dan McClintock and I were talking about that last night, of the immense gratitude that we have for people who've come to this work and who have shared that after years of nothing else working, they finally have the keys now. It's There are no words to express the gratitude, and I'm sure they might say the same thing. The gratitude for being a part of something like this. And what's so funny is that it's relatively unknown. We don't spend much marketing money. I don't know if you noticed that. We're not out to try to save the world, but in our little small community, our corner of the world, us and you, we can make some serious headway here into unlocking the doors that have been locked to us before, like the somatic doors that have been locked and have been frustrating us for years, decades. We now have the keys, but I'm aware that as you're listening, there's different degrees of seeing that. I mean, you could be right now going through something really heavy in your body, and you might be listening to me saying, bullshit, I feel like crap right now. um, but you can see why then we want to forum, because this kind of stuff happens. Like, healing doesn't happen in a straight line, neither does awakening. And so to be supported through that process, because again, when you're doing deep somatic work, the metaphor of like the healing going up a mountain is good enough for as a metaphor, but again, see how you circle around to the same triggers and traumas on that mountain until something is seen. So you could be circling around in your healing path and you keep coming back to this one really central story or trauma, and it keeps tripping you up until you see what you have to see there, feel what you have to feel there, and then you don't get tripped up on that anymore. That trauma, that thing gets put to rest, and you can continue on the trajectory of healing. But anywhere along the way, as you circle back to something, without having the context of what's happening, you could easily, the mind easily tells a story that results in you bowing out of the process without knowing where you're at and why something is happening. It's easy to do. You can trust your mind. You can trust the body. The body doesn't lie, but the mind does. And when the mind starts to interpret this kind of process, it finds little reasons to bow out because this work is very threatening to the mind. All non duality is threatening to the mind, but this is threatening to the mind on a more unconscious level. And we say that is that once you get into the unconscious survival strategies, repression, deficiency stories from childhood, that's really threatening. There's also incredible freedom there because it is unconscious and repressed, and because they are such deep survival patterns, but they're still not who we are. Even if I'm unsafe, for example, it serves you really well, it doesn't mean that that's really what you are. And so as you start to question things like that that are foundational to your ego, somatically held, you can imagine how threatening that would be. That's my point. And again, if left to your own devices, you can easily talk yourself out of the process, not even recognizing you're doing it, weaving some story or narrative together that interprets a particular experience a certain way, right? And then you spin that narrative, and that narrative tells you something, but you don't realize it's a way of getting you out of the work. It's a resistance. It's a bypass coming up. Without people around you, how would you even know? Because we're the last to know in a situation like that. Other people around us may see it before we see it. When we're spinning a story of resistance and fooling ourselves into believing it's reality as a way to protect ourselves against this threat of inquiry. I had never taken someone through a process where something was going to be really scary and the mind was saying, this is scary, I don't want to do this, this is threatening. I've never taken someone through that process and then they said, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that. So if you're sitting at that place where something really big feels like it's there and it feels insurmountable and it feels like I don't even want to deal with this because what would happen? I might be out of control. I might I might start using heroin. I might run out into the streets and take my clothes off. I might go crazy. That's what I mean by the mind's antics because that just doesn't happen. You just don't hear those stories. It's the mind saying this, scaring you out of inquiry. Because as you go through the process, what happens is the mind gets quieter. It doesn't get louder. As you go through these areas that are scary, it quiets the mind. It brings the openness. It's the exact opposite of what the mind says. You don't go crazy. But you could see as you were left to your own device, you could tell stories like that. And those thoughts that come up could win out. That say, this is too much, this is too scary. This is why we need support. If you don't stay here to find these breakthroughs, if you don't find the support that you need to be able to inquire in a way that's really effective, if you're left to your own devices, your own resistance, and your own narratives, you could see how you would easily bow out of that. That's what I mean. But listening to each other talk about it, it becomes really difficult to bypass here, if you haven't noticed. We say it that way. Whereas we can get away with it in other places. You could be in a different method and just maybe the method encourages bypassing or you're doing it and nobody's sort of calling you out on it. Here, we're gently calling each other out on it, but we're really just in the methodology that doesn't lend itself to bypassing. You can go into those areas that you've been avoiding here, but that doesn't mean you want to. See what I mean? Areas that we've been bypassing, even if we're encouraged not to bypass anymore, it doesn't mean we're just really excited and eager to go into that area now. So it's nice to hear that other people have gone through it though, so that people can reassure you, like, you're not crazy. You're not crazy at all. And then just to keep looking because it's worth it. I'm just thinking of certain times in sessions where we've had real breakthroughs and the person is so grateful that they stayed around. And then I think back at like, wow, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, you were in a place where you were questioning even being here because you were at one of those places where your mind got a hold of you and, tried to spin that narrative, but somehow you stuck with it. I see this all the time. People stick with it. They don't let that mind take them out. And then they hang around long enough to really get the benefit of the work, and the gratitude is immense. So what I say to folks there is remember this. Because there will be other times as you go into other areas where it'll feel insurmountable. It'll feel like it's too much. And you'll forget this moment where you stuck with inquiry and you broke through something. And the next time your mind will do the same thing, it'll spin a narrative, or it could. So take this experience and, don't identify with it, but don't forget it. Because that's how this work works. You could be in an inquiry for days, weeks, perhaps even months, and an inquiry can feel endless. And easily you can bow out of that process. But if you stay with it, see, the breakthrough that you have is not something that you can have in other places. If you, this is very hard to explain, but where else are you going to be encouraged to literally see the emptiness of your most core programs, like the core traumas? That's where the real healing is. We're getting closer to the time. I just want to remind you that we're having an open meeting, interactive meeting for all the people that are members of our new members area. If you want to become a member, go to Facebook, my main page. At the top or near the top, you'll see Kiloby members area. We're now open. Click on the link. And so we'll have that meeting at about 7 a.m. Pacific, 9 Central this morning. Everyone's welcome. Everyone who's a member of that. And if you've never been to a Saturday meeting, come anyway and just listen. You don't have to say anything, but you can listen to people and what it's like to be in a deep KI process. And it helps you maybe contemplate whether this is the right process for you. Just listening to other people. And if you're in a process, it can just, people have told me, it can be rather nice just to sit with people and listen and see yourself in their experience. So, encouraging you to do that. Join me, join us. Okay. Hey, Deborah, it looks like you answered your question. I don't know what the word skitter means, so you might have to help me there. Do I have to look that up? Skitter. Yeah, I'm giving a lot of tips on inquiry. I don't know what skitter means. I'm just kind of feeling into that word. But on the forum, I'm giving a lot of tips about that, like how to kind of stay in the process when the mind wants to go off. Like, for example, sometimes when you do these inquiries, the thinking mind starts coming in and reporting, right? And so people need help with that to spot that, where the mind starts trying to understand things in the middle of the process. So we're working on that, like helping people spot that and then relate differently to the mind that's doing that. That's just one of many things that can happen with inquiries like this, because think about how triggering this really is when we're doing like reverse inquiry. If you know reverse inquiry, it triggers up everything that you believe, even if you didn't know that you believed it. And it sort of forces it up in front of you. And so you can see how the mind would skitter. I don't know what skitter means, but as you force up these very core programs that usually do not see the light of awareness, and then here they come up, you can imagine how the mind would, whatever skitter means, or the mind would do something in the face of that. Yes, that's why the tips are so helpful, because we need help as we're conjuring these things up. Right, goes all over the place. Skitter means to go all over the place in defense. Exactly. So the coaching that we're doing is how you're relating to phenomena. How you relate to it matters. Because if you relate to it in certain ways, the skittering happens more. But if you bring your sort of single focus to something, and with certain pointers, you can steady your gaze on something, like really rest with it. Relate to it differently. Dispel the mind that's skittering all along the way, and then stick to seeing. Yeah, it's a skill. It really is a skill. And we're not born with that skill. We're born with unconsciousness. We are raised in unconsciousness. Think of it that way. If you question why do we have to have skill to know what we are, it's because unconsciousness is really unskillfulness. Think back when you were a child and your parents, how unskillful and unconscious they were with regard to what they believed and the traumas that they downloaded onto you. They didn't have skill, which means they didn't have any way to navigate their unconsciousness. And so they put it on you. So you learned the unskillfulness. You learned how to be unconscious from your parents, just like I did. And so it's a skill of unlearning that unconsciousness. Let me just leave you with this thought. I may or may not come back this morning, maybe to Facebook. Have you been, is sort of a question, have you been interested in awareness teachings or presence teachings, and you take that instruction, rest as awareness, and you implement that in your life, but something feels off? You may not know what it is, or it feels like resting as awareness is effort. It takes effort, a lot of efforting to come back. If it feels like something isn't resolved in your body and you're hearing these awareness pointers and you rest, but this thing in your body seems to pull your attention or seems to make you feel restless or uncomfortable and contributes to the seeking, you might be interested in this work. And because it's often the missing key for people like that who cannot, they're efforting, just hear this out for a second, efforting to rest as awareness. Where does that come from? Because the awareness is already here. Why are we efforting to recognize it? Unless our bodies have unresolved things in them, like hidden unconscious identifications that are running in the background, making the body feel tight, contracted, restless, creating oscillation, like I've got it and then I've lost it. Efforting to come back to awareness because the body is restless, it's uncomfortable, it doesn't, so to speak, want to be here. So if that's your experience, you might want to explore KI a little more because that's what we're doing. We're focusing on the embodiment of that awareness, which means no longer avoiding these things in the body that create these challenges. So resting after you've done a good amount of inquiry is something that happens naturally. You don't effort to do it because your body's been included in the whole process. So whatever was creating the restlessness or contraction or discomfort, oscillation gets cleared. The unconscious identifications get seen. So the body adjusts accordingly, making it easier and more natural just to be here as awareness. I would think that those folks who were kind of doing that practice where they're coming back home, coming back to awareness, coming back to awareness, there's going to be things in there in your experience that are going to be challenging with that. Like you're going to be able to come back as long as you're not really anxious or triggered on a deficiency story or experiencing a trauma response, or as long as you don't have chronic pain or strong body contractions. But frankly, most people have those things. So we're talking about most people. So again, maybe you're just in the outer edges of this work and you're listening Maybe you pop into these videos every now and again. You're more interested in the more standard non-dual teachings, but something in your body or something feels off. You might want to listen more closely. Maybe even follow us to the forum to hear what we're saying about all this. If you're not even interested in non-duality, and many people are coming to this work who don't have an interest in awakening, enlightenment, any of that, they just don't want to suffer anymore. There's a place for you too, because this work isn't just about seeking enlightenment, it's about dealing with issues that have not been resolved that are creating suffering. So, if there's suffering, that's what we deal with here. Maybe you've been involved in somatic work, but it just isn't skillful enough. Hear me out. Are you being told to listen to your inner body? Are you being told, like, this seems like a very mature pointer, and it can be until it's relied on exclusively. But are you being told, like, to come down into your body and just listen and watch for things to arise? Like a very organic process where you just listen to see, look for cellular memory or whatever else. Are you doing that, but the contraction's remaining? The body's remaining contracted, painful, restless. Maybe your listening isn't going far enough, but nobody's telling you. Nobody knows that you're working with. That listening only produces so much because things are unconscious and repressed. So you're listening for a mechanism that's already decided it's not going to give it to you. It's like listening into a vacuum because whatever's there, you don't have access to it. You're listening, but all you're doing is feeling something uncomfortable. You don't actually hear it. This is a hard lesson to learn because it really feels like a very mature, advanced pointer to come down and listen. And it can be very helpful. Of course, it's part of the process here is learning how to listen. But we also understand here that certain things are not going to be sounding themselves out because they're repressed and unconscious. So you can kind of listen until the cows come home. And the great majority of that won't come up. Maybe you're listening and that's your practice and you're wondering, is KI going to take me deeper? Well, come and let's see. There's no way to know until you give it a try. Okay. Join me in the meeting at 7 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Central. Go to the members area. Facebook has the link. And we're going to be doing experiential work today. It's almost all experiential work, group inquiry, and things like that. Join me.